exactly who I am. Now, say my name.
We must pay homage to him.
All right, folks, we are back yet again. The third time this week. Will, are you tired of talking to me yet?
I just want to know if at the post-game presser is Dave Doran going to say my name to the... I don't know. Is the media going to be there? How does this work?
They're going to zoom in, I guess. I don't know. So game week. We had James on this week. Kind of gave us a little look back of... or look forward of the season and his thoughts on it. And we'll try to touch on that as well. But I want to start with week one. We hadn't really talked about it. We went over the depth chart and we talked to James. We didn't talk about what you saw in week one. So just want to rattle through a few of them. Georgia Tech, FSU. I'm not sure how much you watched of it, but what did you think?
I saw the final 2 minutes of it. I was doing the smart thing by watching Finding Nemo in a backyard party. So we were mind was off football after watching UNC win. I wasn't surprised though. Florida State's in shambles after going through basically 3 new schemes in was it 3 years, 4 years since Jimbo?
Yeah. Yep.
And to me, it's going to be obvious that they're going to be disarray. They were kind of poster childs early on in the ACC is going to play football during COVID with their players speaking out about disconnects in the program. And you hadn't heard that much from Georgia Tech. So I guess it gave me hope, right? I mean, those still look like 2 games that we could easily win. Georgia Tech will obviously be better by the end of the year, though.
Yeah, I mostly agree with that. Georgia Tech's going to be interesting to watch how they develop with that freshman quarterback. He looked like he had some talent, but he definitely made a lot of mistakes. But the one that I can't really get over is how bad Florida State is. I know Mike Norvell just got there and he was dealing with some other stuff. But how do they still not have an offensive line at this point? And how is their best quarterback, Darrell Blackman? I think that's just bonkers.
Yeah, I mean, their offensive line has been a problem for a long time. And I think Florida State's one of those blue chip style programs that I'd be curious to see if the guys that they target at offensive line are, all highly rated before they start getting FSU offers or if they are inflated by FSU. It's just really weird to me to be in an extremely talent-rich area. You could just stay in Florida and never leave it, and you should be able to basically put together an elite squad. Maybe it's the impact of UCF being better at football. Florida.
Shit. If UCF is Florida State's problem, they've got bigger problems.
Well, no, what I'm saying is they're picking up more guys than they used to. So the guys that Florida State could, expect to kind of circle back on, I think are getting captured there. I mean, people need to remember UCF, I think it's the biggest school, or at least the biggest public school in Florida.
It is.
And it's got a huge alumni base, and it's a way better program than folks would give it credit for. If we were drafting the 60 teams or whatever for the year, that I would be just drop off the entire Pac-12 and give me UCF in their place. That's how I feel about the talent there versus other places.
Still, you can't be FSU and be having problems dealing with UCF in your backyard.
Yeah.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but
I'm just saying it's not the heyday where they in Florida just had complete rough shot over that whole place. I guess Miami was a problem back then. But I guess the thing I took away from it is Norvell comes in and installs a new system, and they look really bad. And it just makes me wonder, are we going to look that bad too? Sorry, guys.
Yeah, that's I hadn't thought about it that way. That is a sobering thought right there. I'm not sure. I was I was going to say I'm sure Scary Terry wishes he had gone to the pros now, but
I do.
yeah, we'll get to us in a minute.
Yeah,
that's an interesting thought, though.
The only thing I'll say about Florida State and what you were saying is Blackman he just has never developed. I remember when was it Francois that he replaced? We were talking about this, I think, at two episodes ago on Monday, and there was all this chatter about Blackman being this freak athlete and was the next big thing. And maybe it's kind of unfair because he's had to go through Jimbo and guy whose name I can't even remember now. What was it? Oh yeah, Taggart. And Taggart has a history of blowing programs up too. That's his whole style. So it's like that's his thing. He blows it up, then he builds it up, right? So I would think if I'm a quarterback, I lose Jimbo in my last year. It's completely disrupted by a hurricane and then Jimbo clearly checking out. And then we get Taggart. Okay, well, we're going to blow everything up. So I suffer through that in my second year at the head. And then it doesn't develop anyway, enough. And then we lose him. And now I got a new new coordinator and a new system. And COVID just happened. So I just feel like, he's never going to get a chance. Like his 4-year window has been just like probably the worst it could have been for him when he picked Florida State.
That's some bad luck if you lay out that way.
Mm-hmm.
Man.
I'm in a good mood.
Yeah. He really hasn't developed how I thought he was going to develop either. He looked basically the same quarterback that he had been ever since. And they look super beatable. Like, I don't know how good we're going to be, but just looking at them and maybe what I expected them to be, they look super beatable right now. So
I agree.
The other game this week or last week, UNC Syracuse. And I knew what was going to happen with this game, right? Syracuse hung around. They're not good. But it was a closer game. Carolina's not as good either. But the score at the end of the game was large enough that people were going to say, "Oh yeah, Carolina! Yeah, look how good they." My old man walks into my house Sunday afternoon, and he says, "Oh, did you see Carolina? Yeah, they look really good." And I was like, "Did you watch the game?" He's like, "No, but I saw the score." It's like I knew that was going to happen. I knew it. Like they've already been getting the bump, and they just get that. I don't know, man. That just benefit of the doubt, I guess. But they did not look good. I didn't think they looked good.
I thought they looked like trash. Syracuse, okay, all throughout I'm just calling it the COVID season of, the fall camp period. Mm-hmm. Those guys were talking about, their 2 leading running backs opted out. I don't know how many other guys on the team opted out. They had guys talking about how the protocols were insufficient. You had they were like boycotting practices. They were so dysfunctional. You knew they were going to be trash. And then you find out that they've got a fullback / backup tight end that's having to play like offensive guard. And the fact that they were able to basically say, okay, we're going to rely on some good secondary play and we're just going to sit back and say, if you're going to beat us, you just got to beat us on the ground, essentially. They, weren't doing anything special at all on defense. I didn't think they weren't blitzing really in a dynamic manner, and they were still able to get to Howell and fluster him. And I swear to God, maybe it's just the way he looks, but Sam Howell to me just isn't that smart of a quarterback. And if you take away the big, cheap, deep shots and say you're going to have to actually pick this defense apart and make the second and third read, he looks completely lost back there. And, and then you factor it in and then you're like, okay, well, Syracuse is traditionally kind of an undisciplined team anyways. They're kind of just a mouthy, that's the only way crappy teams win games, in my opinion, when you don't have Eric Dungey. So it wasn't surprising to me that they blew a perfectly good punt return touchdown with a completely worthless block in the back, or a crackback block. And then they missed wide open touchdowns. They had all kinds of penalties. I mean, going into halftime, they could have been up 17-7.
Yeah.
And any decent team, like I think I texted you during this or after, maybe I put it on Twitter. If UNC had played Auburn like they were supposed to, we wouldn't be hearing about UNC for the rest of the year. That team would have been, I said they would have been pounded into the Stone Age.
Yes.
Yeah, that's that. I'll take a break for a second.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. They really got the benefit of playing a bad Syracuse team. I don't think it looks sharp. I think they're okay, but I was happy to see one writer of all the writers and all the national news. One of the writers from USA Today said, "Let's slow down on the Tar Heels a little bit." Like they actually watched the game and they saw what everybody else did. So, of these four, we play all four of these teams that we've mentioned so far, and they're all beatable. All right, we mentioned this yesterday or whenever we talked to James, that most of these games on our schedule, they feel like they're 50-50 games. And I feel like that too. And, watching these four teams play, I feel like they're all beatable. Like none of them intimidate me. And I think they're all picked ahead of us except for maybe Georgia Tech. So I don't know, man. I think that, that makes me feel good without getting into the weeds on Carolina. But I think that makes me feel good.
Yeah, I think the last thing I'll say about that game and what I've just noticed in a lot of these is it seems like special teams was very much impacted by COVID and any kind of lack of continuity at practices. And you saw it on the punt returns in that game. You saw it with Wake Forest. They have a really good kicker who was just missing easy field goals as far as he's concerned. Dave Clawson.
Yeah, Q's too. Q's kicker.
Yeah, Q's is kicker too. That first kick of the game, he misses. And, these are guys that are supposed to be automatic. So I guess I'm kind of like leading up to it. We'll get to it eventually is if State can just play like a clean game and, guys just do the basics, we could easily win this. I think this is a margins game. You just got to win the margins slightly and you can win it.
Right. Yeah, I think the same thing. And then the last game, Wake Clemson. We'll talk about Wake here in a minute, but looking at Clemson, even though we don't play them this year, Clemson's good. There's not going to beat around it. Not going to say it's a 50-50 game if we did play them or when we play them in the ACC championship game. But they're not the same. They'll get better, right? But they're not sharp. I think they're missing that dynamic wide receiver. They didn't have the speed that seemed to, stretch the field. And, they're just young all around. But Trevor Lawrence is so good. He covers up almost all of that. So it was interesting. They're not super dominant, I don't think, but still really, really good.
I think the thing that's fascinating about Trevor Lawrence, maybe it's just because I've been watching, all these other duds and then watching him play, is he throws the ball with so much velocity, but it looks like it's so catchable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what it is about his throwing motion or just the way the ball looks when it leaves his hands. But I just keep thinking that every time he throws it, it's like the ball moves so fast and covers so much distance, and it's so precise, and it's right in their hands so often. And I thought that they would be rough, and I think it took them like a series or two. I mean, after the second series, they just went like mowed down Wake Forest down the field. And they weren't just doing it with like big shots or things like that. They just proceeded to just be like, hey, we're better than you. Yeah. We'll see them in the championship game, though.
Yeah, certainly.
I mean,
Lawrence, it's probably the flowing locks that really throw you off. You're looking at his hair as opposed to the ball.
I cannot get the concept of Jar Jar Binks and that hair like out of my head. I can't.
I always see the TikTok girl. That's all.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, I stopped looking at that because it was just so disturbing to me.
It really was. All right, so week 2 is up, and the game people probably want us to talk about is State Wake Forest. We finally get a night game to open the season, and nobody can go, not even the parents. Awesome. That's classic ACC for you right there. But I know you've been paying attention to Wake Forest as your very long list of notes that I'm looking at in front of me. So give me the rundown on Wake Forest.
Oh, I'm dialed in. I listened to one podcast today, which was the Dave Clawson radio show. So I was just curious to see like what he was thinking coming out of that game. So going into the Wake Clemson game, if you hadn't been following, they had a lot of guys that were held out in their secondary. They had a safety that was playing cornerback. And I think they had a redshirt freshman or maybe a sophomore that was playing safety. They were like playing completely out of positions. So I think they got, he said they stayed relatively healthy. I think they lost one guy to a freak injury in the game. But I thought, his Clawson's view was that they needed a lot, to clean up a lot of areas, coach speak, typical stuff. But what I thought was interesting is he said emotionally it really hit them in the pregame speech that it was kind of like a holy crap, it's crazy we're even actually playing football. And he said it was a very, very emotional experience as they were coming out of the locker room. So I'm curious to see if we kind of see some jitters of some sort from our guys, feeling the same way, not getting the opportunity to get it out last week. And Wake may come out a little calmer. Their defense, looked pretty good on the first drive, but after that, it was all downhill. Their field goal kicker was off. The one thing that they did that he talked about a little bit was that they wanted to take some deep shots, and that's a focus of his. He reiterated they want to take deep shots consistently. And on that first drive, there was a big sack because he was standing back there trying to take that shot. But they did take a deep shot that looked like it was pass interference. It would have been a touchdown. So they would have been up 7-0 starting the game. Could have been a little different. But, overall, he had some interesting things to say about us. He said that we were a good program, 5 consecutive winning seasons. He really reiterated that the injuries decimated our team. And so, no one should have expected us to be good last year. So he seemed kind of surprised, I guess, that people had, expectations as the season was going on. He was like, there was no chance, basically. But he pointed out how, when you get that many guys hurt, the young guys have experience. And now that we have a ton of starters, and he was ripping off the starters. I know it's a coach thing to do, but he was ripping off names. He was talking in percentages, how many tackles we had coming back, on the defense, tackles from a Seuss and all this stuff. It was, Clawson seems to be a really smart guy. And he was talking about how State's got the advantage from watching the game tape, but they had the advantage of actually playing a game and getting the jitters out. It was interesting. He said this, he said, we have to deal with the coordinator change. And so we're uncertain what they're going to run. And so he said, I don't know if they're going to run the Texas offense, the Ohio State offense, or the NC State offense. And to me, I thought that was interesting because it revealed perhaps a gap where he did not go back and look at the Nebraska tape.
That's just thinking the same thing. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I hope Beck was like, no, we're going right back to the run game instead. The rest of that was his hour was talking, Green and Roberson and I don't have the guy's name, Morin, the slot receivers. So I would say they're going to take deep shots. And I think the big question is how are we going to play against it? Other than that, he did say that playing without fans was like playing at a scrimmage. And he said the one funny thing for the players, at least, is he said the quarterbacks said that because you don't have the fans, after you make a pass and you get knocked to the ground, you have no idea if you actually completed it because there's no fan reactions or anything like that. So they said there were kind of some weird elements like that to playing without fans.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, also Boogie Basham apparently plays on special teams on the field goal kicking unit. And he said he's long-armed and tall, and he's super strong, and he can also be used for a trick play. And I was like, oh, cool. That's going to happen against us. Other than that,
certain. Yeah, there was one other coach that used to be able to rattle off names like that at a press conference. I don't even think Doran does it. I think he calls them by their number most of the time. A lot of coaches just call them by their number. But Ruffin McNeil would do the same thing. He would just rattle off, that boy, blah, blah, blah. And he would rattle off his name and 12 of his stats. You're like, how do you remember this? There's very few coaches that like go that deep. And, Clausen's always been considered an intelligent coach, so I can see.
Don't you think Doran should just send Ruffin McNeil out for press conferences?
Probably. It'll go a long way towards the old folksy theme that we were talking about previously. Going back to what you said about talking about NC State for a minute, the Nebraska offense. I read something. It was IPS. They did a interview with one of the Texas reporters, and they asked him a lot about Beck. And one of the things that stood out to me the most was he said to really get an understanding of what Beck wants to do, you need to look at Nebraska. He said that's when he wasn't under the influence of other offensive minds. Like at Texas and Ohio State, he's with Tom Herman and Urban Meyer, et cetera, et cetera. And when he's at Nebraska, he's under a defensive coach like Dave Doran with Bo Pelini. And he said, that's the offense I expect NC State to run. This is the Texas guy talking. He said, I expect them to run something closer to that Nebraska offense. And he said, to me, that mirrors the Oregon offense, where you don't have the maulers that Texas and Ohio State are going to have, but you're going to have two running backs and a quicker line and maybe a smaller, quicker line to be able to run outside stretch zones and things like that. And I mean, I'm sitting here thinking while I'm reading this, if we get close to like an Oregon rushing attack, like that's what we've been promised since day one of Dave Doran. Like I would love to see it now, especially now that we have some superior backs. I think that would be amazing.
That would be the weirdest turn of events if that all came back. That was actually a really interesting article, kind of breaking down some things. The guy was really blunt about the first year at the Texas and how Herman, why he took over the plays, which when you read it, at least to me, I was just like, that's a ridiculous reason to basically demote your offensive coordinator. For those who aren't going to read the article or haven't subscribed to IPS, they basically they had an insane amount of injuries. They didn't have a tight end, and a tight end is very important to the Tom Herman offense. It's like they refuse to take a tight end off the field. So, one, I was reading, I was like, Kerry Angeline and Dylan Ottenreath and Bill and Parham are going to, they are going to get used a lot. But it was basically like the quarterbacks rotated because neither of them could stay healthy. It was basically they get one healthy for a game and then they lose it, and the next guy would come back and then he'd get injured and back and forth. And then Herman took over play calling duty, and it's like you can't expect to be good when that's happening. So I guess it kind of clouds my judgment further about Tom Herman as a coach. So I think it's interesting then that Dave Clawson is like, I don't know if they're going to run the Texas offense. And I'm like, I don't think he would want to run the Texas offense, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm trying to find this quote. It's part of a bigger theme. He's talking about the run game and the quarterback run game and whatnot. But he says, James asked him, what do you think of that type of run game in the Texas guy? I think it's great. It works well. It's a little more similar to those Chip Kelly teams. Whereas Ohio State and Texas just want bigger linemen to run downhill with inside zone. His Nebraska teams had smaller offensive linemen. They were more about being quick. Outside zone was the foundation. I would expect a lot of the pass game techniques would be similar to what they ran at Texas. That's what he's known for, especially since it's NC State, blah, blah, blah. But essentially it's running, a faster running back-based offense and getting them to the outside. And I think that is really exciting to think about. I don't know what we're going to get, but just that thought alone, I was reading that like, yeah, this is great. Let's do this. This is what we need.
It's funny that they think that we've got just like these, it makes it sound like we have like Wake Forest linemen. The way he's describing our O-line, I was trying to get the depth chart up. I was hoping I could find it with the, with our sizes, but I actually think we're better set up to be more of a mauling offensive line. And, but the skill players, I actually think match up really well with that rate. Like I started thinking about, Dylan Otterith can kind of just get flexed out and then come back in and play like an H-back, or Kerry Angeline they can move him around and basically get him in the slot and get a mismatch and then put a slot receiver out on a linebacker. It's going to be really, I don't know, just not knowing what we really are doing yet is probably the most exciting part of my week right now, just thinking about football.
I know. I cannot wait. Like Saturday night, I can't get here fast enough. But, I imagine if you can compare State's offensive linemen to Ohio State's offensive linemen, they probably aren't the same size / caliber offensive linemen.
Yeah, I mean, their guys are probably a little bit taller, but I mean, like, Ike Ekwonu is 6'4", 325, Tyrone 6'6", 305. I guess that was one of the things that Clausen was rattling off. He was like, well, the line averages 315, and they've lost 46% tackle production because of a Seuss. But I was like, man, I kind of want that kind of a nerd of a coach, to be honest. But
I don't know. I mean, how are you feeling about this game?
Well, I think everyone's missed the whole thing. That's going to be super obvious. I think we're going to start 4 running backs in the backfield because of all the oars. And it's going to be 5 on the line and 4 running backs and Leary.
Dave Clawson, I'll never see that coming.
Yeah. My expectations are so low. I mean, if we can just get through the first couple drives and not have a bunch of false starts and procedural type penalties, if our guys look sharp, I'm assuming Wake's going to load the box. So can Leary do something early on to get them to back off? I almost wish we would come out and just pipe off like 2 or 3 deep shots to try to get to kind of set the tone. I'm really nervous about the defense. It's first game having to play against a freak tempo. Odell Beckham Jr. for anyone that's an OBJ fantasy holder will be rewarded now. I mean, there's all kinds of things that tell me we're going to lose this game, and that it has zero bearing on how I would predict the outcome for the season too. It's just like, I just wish we had played last week and got the game out against anybody.
Yeah,
that's how I feel.
You sort of appreciate the cupcake games after thinking about just getting dropped right into this kind of this kind of environment. At least I do.
I think so. I mean, are we going to be in shape? Are we going to survive the COVID test, which I guess is tomorrow? I don't know if it's tomorrow or today.
It's Friday usually.
Okay. Yeah. There's just so many freaking unknowns. Is the defensive line outside of Lee McNeil, is someone going to just show up? I don't know. I mean, I'm super excited, but at the same time, I'm just kind of like, I will roll with whatever happens in this game.
Somebody brought it up after the depth chart podcast. Maybe it was for the James podcast, so we didn't ask him, but their point was the wide receivers are basically the same as last year. Why do we expect them to be better? What do you think about that? Like, I didn't know. I've been thinking about that for like a day now, and I still don't know how to answer that question.
I would answer it this. First off, I think Thayer Thomas is going to be like the target hog that you think like a Julian Edelman or someone like that in the slot is. Him and Porter Rooks. So I would say Thayer Thomas did not play baseball, supposedly is healthy, energized, and ready to go. I think that was a big issue last year. Plus, he's had time to work on his connection with Leary. All these guys have had time to work on their connection with Leary, which is good. Carter was a redshirt freshman last year, and I thought he showed promise. He was one of the few kind of bright spots in the wide receiver group, personally. CJ Riley, I think they're going to try to get him back up to speed. But the fact is, if something happens to Carter or if he is ready to go much earlier, just having his ability to just stretch the field is going to be important. I don't even care if he only gets targeted a few times and he drops them a few times. They're going to have to respect him. He is really fast. The one thing that just surprised me was the or between Emeka Emezi and Mr. Cheese Provolone. And, I guess that's the one disappointing thing, because all offseason you hear about how Emeka is grinding it out and this is going to be his year. He's gone back to his number, you name it. The PR machine was on it. And then the depth chart comes out with an or. Now this could be Emeza. Maybe he got caught up in the COVID outbreak. Maybe he tweaked something. Maybe he's just not 100%, or maybe Provolone is really, really good. If Provolone's good, then okay, then I'm not concerned. But if both of them are, I don't know. It just seemed like really weird to me to see that. So it's like I'm higher up on the other two with Porter Rooks and, having Keon Lesane split out from the slot. And then I'm kind of down seeing Emezi with an or by his name.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I had a lot of high hopes for Emezi, and last year, everybody knows he had a bad year last year. Can he rebound? Is he going to have a positive regression? Is he going to look better? Right? Or is he going to be, or was last year where he's at? Right? And that's kind of the question everybody has. He's got a lot to prove. So, that part of it, gives me a little pause to say, yeah, that's why I feel confident in it. I think Devin Carter is somebody that I think is really going to excel. I feel like a guy like that, he started to show last year. He started to show good rapport with Leary, and he just, he played well as a redshirt freshman, I guess. And yeah, so I feel like he's an improvement. CJ Riley's back. Keon Lesane should be better. All these guys should be better, I think. Right? I think the last year was like as bad as it's going to get for them. And with another year under their belt and with some more competition behind them, Rooks pushing Thayer, et cetera, like I think these guys should elevate their game a little bit. That's my thought on that.
Yeah, if Emeza goes out there and only clips in 500 or 600 yards, then like that's fine. I think he will benefit to having a better Carter, a better Thayer. Like, I don't think Emezi is ever going to be like a guy that's causing a ton of separation or anything like that. I think he's more in the mold of like Harmon in that case. You just want him to be consistent. And, I wish I had like the amount of targets here, but look, our quarterbacks were not accurate last year. So that's got to be difficult. The only guy that was probably even playing with the third team quarterback was probably Devin Carter at the start of the season. So maybe that's why he had kind of a better rapport. Who knows? It's great seeing the or beside Thayer and Porter Rooks. That gives me hope that Porter Rooks is the real deal. But at the same time, like I'm not gonna. I guess my expectations are I just want Devin Leary to be about 60% efficient with the passes. But that's enough of a step up that he won't be a massive problem. And if he's better than that, then great. And if he's not good, if for some reason it doesn't click, people are saying positive things about Bailey Hockman. And I'm guessing what happened is Devin maybe got caught up in the contact trace. So Bailey got some reps and things like that. Or maybe they were trying to make sure everyone's, ready to jump in if they need to. So if either of those two could just be slightly better, that's all we need. You just got to be.
Yeah. If Leary is just a little bit better than that, also elevates everybody else. I think that's super important here. You mentioned contact tracing, so I wanted to bring up what Doeren said at presser today. I'm just going to read this quote, this paragraph. We had 105 guys today, and And that's not all COVID related. Some guys are out with ankle sprains and things like that. That's the highest we've been. When we started back after the 8-day break, we had 45 players at practice, and I think we gained about 10 players back per day. A week later, we were up to 84 after September 1st. We're in a good place for the most part. The 105 that we'll have available to play have all been at practice all week. Nobody got out of quarantine yesterday and is totally out of shape. And if they were, we wouldn't put them out there. We feel good about the depth chart guys we have, and those guys have been at practice. So basically, everybody's been at practice, which is a really good sign. If they make it through that testing there yesterday, they've all been in practice for a week now. So it's not like anybody's, been quarantined and, missed the last week of practice, because I think that would be it's super beneficial to be there. So I think that was interesting.
What do you think? What do you get like the general vibe from Doran over the last 3 or 4 weeks? Do you think he's like quietly confident?
Yeah, I think so. I think he feels good about these guys. Maybe more so. I feel like he's trying to temper expectations.
I guess so, but I don't see like the usual like excuse making. Like he's being subtle there with the numbers, right? That's like kind of priming the pump for if they look like terrible, he can be like, I told you how few people we had at practice.
Right.
I
don't think he's. I feel like he's emphasized the positive a lot, and maybe. I had to think back on, did he do that before? I feel like it feels like he's got things under control, which I think is kind of weird.
I wonder if that's having Ruffin, having some extra time here to watch folks. I don't know. He just seems so relaxed. And I was like, this guy does not sound like a guy on the hot seat. And he doesn't sound like defensive Doran. He seems like very low-key chill right now. And I'm shocked, I guess. So part of me thinks like maybe we're looking better than or maybe he just doesn't know. I guess it could be either or.
Yeah, I mean, the Ruffin thing, that's an interesting point. Ruffin's whole MO is just being positive and being relaxed and, loving everybody, so as he always says. So maybe that is rubbing off on Doran. But I think Doran realizes how bad things were last year and how much he got back this year, just from the injury stuff alone. Like if those guys are back, then he's got to feel pretty good about that.
Well, that's true. I think,
yeah.
Was it his presser today where he talked about embracing the suck?
Yeah. I'll find that quote here in a minute.
I saw that though, and I was just like, that's my coach.
Right.
Just got to embrace the suck.
Somebody else he's mentioned a lot, and he mentioned again several times during his presser, was Ricky Person. Ricky's going to be their like in-game captain, as they have it. They always have 4 captains, and they have one different for each game. And he said Ricky's the captain for this year, or for this game. And I think I didn't realize it, but Ricky said it in his interview the other day that, he thought about quitting football. He thought he was done with football because he was hurt so much and kept having repetitive injuries and things like that. And he got really down on himself. And Doran right now is just like praising Ricky Person constantly. Like he's in great shape. His attitude's great. He's like, it's making me excited about Ricky Person. Right. And I don't know if that is like because he's really excited or he's trying to pump up Ricky Person, right? He's trying to make sure Ricky's still in the right place. It feels like the former, where he's like genuinely excited about how good Ricky Person has been.
I think he said that Ricky had been there the entire camp.
Yeah.
Right? I think he's
That's
like
what he said,
like 3 guys. He like mentioned him, Grant Gibson, and someone else.
Skullthorpe.
Yeah. And so I think that means he's like soaked up a ton of reps. Everyone says he's healthy. The little bit of scuttlebutt you get between like the site insiders seems to have been very positive about him. You saw him and CJ Riley goofing off a little bit in the one of the mic'd up episodes. And quite frankly, everyone wants to talk about Zonovan Knight. I think we've talked about this for like 3 straight podcasts. Ricky Person is a complete back, and he can catch the ball. And if he is healthy, he is going to be the guy that no one was talking about really because he was injured so much. And he's going to be the surprise if he can make it through the year. Like I was just looking at a Wake Forest analysis of our offense, and they don't even mention him. They just mention Knight and Houston. And I think, he's going to come out. I guarantee he's going to be the starter. Yeah. And, all it takes is him to rip off a couple runs. And then you start peppering in Knight. And then you start peppering in Houston. And then you've got Mims if you need him for goal line, if that's how they're going to use him. So you can see how this offense, if you have all those guys, could just be so fresh throughout the whole game that if they can wear someone out just enough, then Knight starts popping those big runs and Houston finally breaks through that last shoelace tackle. Like, that's what I think is important about Ricky. He's a little bit bigger than those guys, and he is going to soften them up for them to come in and close the deal. That's how I feel they're going to. Oh, man, I'm so excited.
Yeah, like just listening, especially to Doran talk about Ricky Person, I'm just like, man, this is he's really amped about this. And I guess that probably plays into what you're saying. Is like Doran feels oddly cool and collected right now. And maybe that's part of it. Maybe he sees that he's like, I got a bunch of dudes that can play. And I don't know.
He probably also, I think it's got to feel good to finally have a staff up to the caliber that you were after, right? You've got the coordinator you wanted at offense. You've got a proven P5 coordinator. You don't have to deal with any of this co-OC, co-DC bullshit. Maybe there's just like that element of like everyone's an adult and everyone's got their job to do, and no one right now is gunning for something else or saying, hey, this guy's not listening to me. I think he's like handed the keys over to both sides of the ball, and maybe he's just finally getting to be the administrator. Maybe that's what it is.
That feels like that is right where Doran needs to be, right? We've talked about that before with, Dabo and PJ Fleck and these other guys that let their coordinators coach and they are more organizational, So I feel like if he's getting there, that bodes well for us, right? I think that's a good thing. I want to get into, all right, we'll get to some of the questions we got. Pack recruiting. As Leary gets 3 TDs on Saturday, you're taking the over or under on that?
So after watching what Trevor Lawrence did to Wake Forest, not the passing element, but when they got close to the goal line, they just did some really simple RPO and he waltzed in for 2 touchdowns. So that's why I was getting some clarification on Twitter before we came on here. So I'm going to go push. I don't think he's going over 3, but I could see him get 3, 2 on the ground and 1 in the air.
All right. I feel like I'm going to take the under. I think he probably gets 1 in the air, 1 on the ground. And if all goes accordingly, then the running backs are the ones carrying the load.
Pick sixes do not count, by the way.
That's right. Yeah, right.
Just no mystery fumble. Hold on to the ball when you're rearing back to throw it. No interceptions.
I knew I was going to remember that. I think it was the Syracuse quarterback. He did it twice. He did the same thing. He was going back. Yeah, he was going back to, just taking his drop back and just drop the ball. And I'm like, what? It's like somebody else did it too.
Tommy DeVito. So much hype. That's funny. I just reminded me of how I think it was the third quarter of the game. I think UNC got a score or something like that. And I tweeted, I was like, look, I'm going to go out and get some chores done. And I guarantee when I come back and look at the score, they're going to be up like 2 more touchdowns.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was more than like 5 minutes passed. And I said, all right, I'm going to check. And sure enough, they were up like 24-7 at that point. So.
All right. They also ask, who will get the most receiving yards the first game?
I'm going Thayer.
Thayer Thomas. I'm going to go with Angeline.
I don't know what to think because all the stuff I've kind of read about back as at least during the Herman years, they love peppering the slot.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's something where the slot's going to have like 16, 20 targets, but Angeline's going to get the chunk plays.
That's what I was thinking because watching that Wake Forest Clemson game, the middle of the field, like this, they left the seams open quite a bit. Now that was probably intentional, covering Clemson wide receivers, but that is where Angeline's going to thrive. That's my thought. Which receiver are you most pumped about, other than Chris Scott? Obviously,
I'd say Porter Rooks. It's been a while. I feel like since we've had somebody that was like a pedigree wide receiver. And that's not to like, I'm not trying to throw shade on Harmon. But just something about watching the way Rooks catches the ball. He's like not the fastest, but he just looks super smooth. So that's who I'm going to keep my eye on.
all right.
Are you going to choose the cheese?
I thought about choosing the cheese man just because he's the cheese man, and I feel like he's going to have to be my favorite receiver this year. Yeah, I'm going provolone. Let's go provolone. Do it. Smoked provolone.
Ooh.
Just a thought. Ricky Person starts game one. Yeah, I think so too. Mahesh asks, other than Lim McNeil, who is the next up and coming stud on the D line? Who you got?
Well, everyone's talking about Terrell Dawkins, so I think that's like the easy one. That or CJ Clark.
I thought for sure you're going to go with Davin Van.
I just want to see him do it first. I mean, everything about him like screams freak, and but CJ Clark, like everyone says he was going to contribute last year if he wasn't hurt, and I think Terrell Dawkins is just going to have the opportunity. Like Davin Van's third on the chart, so he'll get to play this game, but I don't know if he's going to. I don't know if he's going to just explode immediately. I think there's just still a big gap between freshman and or senior year of high school and freshman, right? Because did he even redshirt last year?
Who? Clark?
Davin Van. Well, he came in last class, didn't he?
Yeah, no, he came in. Yeah, this year.
Yeah. So, I guess what I'm saying is I just, God, now you're making me second it. No, I'm sticking with it. I'm going Terrell Dawkins.
Yeah, I like Terrell Dawkins too. I think there's a lot of hype coming in on him. Maybe, he was he might have been the highest rated on that offensive line or defensive line class, but really nobody really talked about him because he was kind of quiet. His recruitment was kind of quiet. But I think he's got big time potential. I was going to go with Davin Van just because everybody's hyping him up right now as a true freshman.
It's probably going to be Davin Van. Like dude's a freak.
Yeah.
I just don't want another street situation where it's like he's a freak, but he just doesn't quite get to that level that everyone expected. Now, to me, Street did what he was supposed to. He was supposed to be a run stuffing TFL kind of guy, and he really set the edges. But I guess I'm just like holding back a little bit from freaks because James Smith-Williams has burned us, and Street just never got there 100%.
Yeah,
has he been playing with San Francisco?
Yeah, he got hurt. Yeah, he got hurt, and then he's back, and he's playing, and playing fine. I don't know what his numbers are, but he's getting playing time. He's not going anywhere. Yeah, that's a good one too because he was 5-star hyped up, and everybody kind of had a little Mario comparison or something, and he wasn't that. He's not that kind of player. So I don't know. Davin Van, Terrell Dawkins. I think both of those guys are probably a good pick. You're Tim Beck heading into this game. Based on what we saw from Wake Forest last week, how would you game plan for them?
I just want to take away the deep shots. And I hope that's our theory this year, at least against teams like this. I don't want to see us giving up bombs to UNC, Wake, Cuse, GT, like Georgia Tech. Like part of the issues last year, right? They started off the game and they hit a deep shot and it just flipped the field immediately, right? And Wake's going to test that right away. So, I feel like you play Wake one of two ways, right? You either say, I'm going to take away the run game and just hope that they don't pick me apart. Or you just sit back and say, all right, make them hold that mesh point as long as possible and give our D-line a chance to get in there.
Well, I appreciate your sentiment. I don't think Tim Beck that's his game plan.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, is this defense? Oh, I thought the question was defense.
No, it says you're Tim Beck heading into this game based on what we saw from Wake Forest.
Oh.
How would you game plan for them?
Okay, I didn't hear the Tim Beck part, but you know what? That's what I'm doing. No, if I'm Tim Beck, like I said, I would take some deep shots early, right? I just want to soften them up slightly. Maybe we pop one, right? And then after that, I think he's going to go to that kind of Nebraska style. I think he's going to start testing the edges. Wake does have, when I was looking at their depth chart earlier, their defense is pretty experience laden up front. Basham's a redshirt senior. Kamara is a redshirt senior. They've got a redshirt junior and Tyler Williams, who's coming off of an injury, so keep an eye on that. They have a redshirt sophomore on the line, and then they have a redshirt senior, redshirt junior, redshirt senior at linebacker. Like their front seven is super experienced. Now their back four, supposedly last game, they had nobody, and I think only one guy has come back so far, maybe. So you'd be stupid not to just fire off at their secondary a few times just to see, where they stand. Other than that, like if we leave this game and we have like 50 carries, I won't be sad.
Yeah, I think it's more about what we can do as opposed to what Wake is going to make you not do. Wake's defensive line is okay. I still think you should be able to do a lot of what you want to do. I think Tim Beck he's going to get the ball to the running backs. He's going to take the pressure off of Devin Leary. And, that's I don't think that would have changed no matter what. I think that's the key.
I do wonder if we see some planned called quarterback power or something like that early on, just to get Leary doing something positive. I don't want to see us try to throw to the flats, I guess, right away, like the cheap, easy passes, because I think Wake's going to be all over it. They're going to be sitting up on the line.
Yeah.
That's I guess my fear is if we come in too conservative, I'd rather that just you take some chunk shots right away.
I don't think conservatives in Tim Beck's vocabulary based on.
So you're thinking fullback draw?
Fullback draw, that's right. Yeah, power eye. He's going to come out the power eye.
I'm sorry, F draw. I think it's
right. Yeah. He also says, I think this is our most important game of the season. I think it sets the tone. You have to come out and play well and, execute. I think that really will give you a lot of momentum given what we've seen from these other schools already, right? So we saw 5 of the schools we're going to play already. And I think there's an opportunity there having seen those games.
I mean, look, even when Clemson looks kind of rough, I mean, you should just set the expectations low. Like this game, as far as I'm concerned, is a throwaway. If we win, great, we're ahead of schedule. But if we lose or if we lose close, or if we look sloppy, it's I'm not surprised. And I think we'll be able to make up for it against Virginia Tech because I think they're going to look very sloppy when we get to play them.
If we look sloppy, badly coached sloppy, it's different than there's a difference there. But if we look sloppy like we did in that West Virginia game last year, I'm going to lose it. Mm-hmm. I'll be honest, I'm going to lose it because you can't do that. You can make some mistakes, you can have some penalties and things that are just natural from not playing football, but looking sloppy and poorly coached, I might go ballistic.
Well, I would just say put your mouth in before you snap the football for the punt. Put your mouth guard in, right? That was one thing that happened there.
Yes, stuff like that, man. Like where your head's not
But
in
that was what? That was like the third game of the year, right? Like they shouldn't have been that sloppy for that game.
That was the first
That's
real
what was
game, though. They played Ball State and Western Carolina or something like that. Or
Didn't they play ECU to start the game here?
and Western.
I mean, like what I'm saying is like they had tune-ups where it was you were finally playing people up at your talent level, questionable West Virginia, but that game just exposed like these offensive coordinators don't seem to know how to actually do a game plan or to get past the first couple series in their game plan. The defense, it was the classic, like they came out and surprised you with tempo and our guys are running around like molasses.
Right.
I just don't want to see that. If the guys look comfortable in the 3-3-5, if we're not dropping the ball like crazy, like I said, penalties, this game could just simply come down to special teams. This could be a close, gross game, and I don't think it would dictate what we'll look like 5 games in the season, unless Leary is just like a turnover machine.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an important game, and I'm going to be very critical on how they look. I think a lot of people will.
Save it for the chat.
Yeah, we'll get there too. Wolfpack Rob, my thought for the day is Devin Carter will be the best wide receiver on the team this season. I think it's certainly possible. I think there is a wide open, I don't know what the right terminology is for it. I think it's wide open. It's a competition that anybody can win. And Devin Carter, like I said earlier, I think he's got a rapport with Leary, and I think there's certainly some merit to that.
When Chris Scott scores that first 73-yard yak play, it's not even going to be a deep bomb. They're just going to like toss it to him behind the line, and then he's going to like Neo Matrix his way through everybody. Y'all are going to remember.
I could see Nerdy Clausen like, who's this guy? Like, he's not on the depth chart. Like, where did he come from? Yeah.
He like defogs his glasses and is like, what? He's not on the depth chart.
Clifford Franklin. What? Yeah. And last question we had was coming from the depth chart. You get, what do you say? You guys talked about the kick returners recently, but didn't mention Keon Lassane started as a true freshman there last year and isn't listed at this all season. Is there concern for him? Just seems risky putting our best safety and our starting running back on kick return. I think we kind of talked about that a little bit, about the risk with those two. We didn't talk about Keon Lassane. I don't know why he's not back there. I mean,
I don't think he was very good.
Maybe not.
And
I don't know.
James was talking. They did a breakdown of this, I think, on one of the IPS podcasts the other day. That Tanner Ingle had 7 returns for touchdown in high school, between punt and kick. He might just be one of those guys that is a natural at the position. I'm not happy about 2 guys that could impact the depth chart. I just think Keon Lassane didn't look good doing it. And, again, it could also be like, take the depth chart with a grain of salt this game and the next game, because there are clearly people that have been missing from practice that have just come back. So there are guys with orders by their names that could be for that reason and things like that. So, I don't know. I mean, if Tanner Ingle takes one to the house, like, all right, I'll trade it in. Like, we've seen how those can change a game on their own. And I think too, someone maybe had mentioned it, that they've been cross training so much in the secondary to keep guys healthy. And you've got Akeem and these other guys that, they probably think like, hey, if it comes down to it, we can slot somebody in, because it's not very often that your kick returner gets injured for the year. I mean, it just really isn't. When's the last time our kick returner got injured for multiple games?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, everybody's going to think about CJ Riley, but that was on coverage.
That was a freak thing. Now, if CJ did get his clock cleaned in that Marshall game, but that was also a freak. I can't remember if he was catching it off the bounce or what happened there. I mean, things would be better if you just had like a legit superstar. But, Nyheim Hines was a game changer back there. And if he had gotten injured those years, you had just Reggie Gillespie.
Interesting.
Boy, I'm hitting some great points tonight, guys.
Tanner Ingle is fearless. He plays like that. I think that's what you want back there. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm curious what Keon was saying. I think at some point we see him back there. I just don't know when that is. And just take a knee anyway. Get the ball to 25 and let's go.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Just fair catch it, right? Yeah. Like there's not even. If we just did that all season, and they just said, well, those two had the best hands, and I think too, like there were a couple times I think Lassane brought it out when he shouldn't have last year.
Say the same thing. Yeah, I think there was a couple of that in there that decision making might have come into play there.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm hoping some of those guys like Lassane, they get to settle down in this offense, and you get to see what they can really do. We'll see.
Well, that's all I got. You got anything else?
Are we gonna predict the score?
Oh, go ahead. What you got?
24-21, NC State.
24-21. I'm going to go 34-17 Pack.
I don't know. If it gets that high, I'm thinking the other team scored.
Yeah, I don't know. I just hope we run the ball a lot.
What is the we didn't even look. What's Vegas saying right now? We're favored. But
favored by 3. 1 second.
This is the best part of the podcast for everybody. Over under is 53. So what did I say? 24-21. So I'm taking the under in that, and then you are taking the over, right? 34-17.
Yep.
Mm. Now I'm regretting my choices.
No, I'm on the push. What's it, 51? What'd you say it was?
No, it says 53 on ESPN.
Oh, so I'm on the under too.
What are you, 34-20? Oh, yeah. Gosh, maybe it's good. Well, it's down to 1.5 spread though. Oof.
Good bet. Take the under, folks. Take the under.
I mean, I wish someone had done some analysis. I bet the unders killed last week.
I know they did in the NFL. I didn't see college, but yeah, I know they did. Unders were good in the NFL. One other announcement. Will and I have been talking about how to, or maybe something different for the games. So I think we're going to try to host some kind of chat rather than just hanging out on Twitter. I'll put the link out there, but if anybody's interested in that, let me know. I think, to me, that's probably a better way for me to spend my time than to be ranting on Twitter. Yeah, so I think we're gonna think about doing that. We're probably gonna try to do some other things throughout the year, but that's what we're thinking about for Saturday night. So if you're interested, let me know.
Just don't come in too sauced, guys. I want good spelling.
I don't care. You can come in sauced. Come in hard. Go hard, folks. Saturday night.
I just don't want the negativity after the first drive.
It's going to happen regardless. It's probably going to be from me, so just preparing everybody.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. We go right back to Twitter and say it's a toxic environment in that chat room.
That'll get the most attention that way.
That's true.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all I got. I got some other things that we're going to save for next week, but that's all I got. Everybody, thanks for listening. Hopefully the Pack comes out with a W. Looks good doing it. I will settle for nothing less. And I don't think we'll do 3 podcasts next week, but you never know.
Oh, God, please no.
Quarantine is driving me crazy, so yeah. All right, folks, thanks for listening. Go Pack.
Go Pack.
You all know exactly who I am.
G'day, Curd Nerds. Another cheese-making taste test. This one, something special